This request that came is short and direct. It says, would you do a quick tip on painting clapboard buildings, or as the locals say in our area, clapboard? That one just requires a few skills. As with any one of your requests, when you ask me to paint a specific kind of thing, my thinking goes to what kind of skills do you need to do that? Because what I know is that everything is different according to how you're seeing it, according to how the light's shining on it. I mean, the same image could be different according to where you are in relation to that image and what kind of light's there. And many times it has to do with the weather and the light. So what we need, what it's better to do is to know skills. What skills do you need to make something happen? And this particular one, there are some skills for if you're painting a clapboard building. Now I chose a white one here. This person didn't specify color, but the hue is almost irrelevant. The principle is going to be the same no matter what color you use. So what's the first thing we do? The first thing we do is observe. Now, if you're having trouble seeing values, the differences in values, then it might be good to get yourself a value scale. You can go to our website, dianemise.com, click on free stuff in the menu, and look for traditional value scale, and you can print this one out free. Now what I've done here in this one is to just punch holes in all the little value areas so that I can use that to teach with, but I can also use it to find value registrations that I'm looking at. So if you look at a building like this, you will probably go astray if you say clapboard building to yourself. And you'll probably also go astray if you say white clapboard building to yourself. Forget all of that and look at, first of all, what is it made of in terms of values. And that's determined by how the light is shining on it, where the light is and how the building, and also to some degree where you're standing in relation to it. So I've got two different viewpoints here of white clapboard buildings. Let's look at this one because this is more complete to show you what I'm talking about. Now, if I take this value scale with the holes punched in it, and I just start with what we call value 1, and I'm looking here, well, let's look at where we see it the lightest, right in here where the sun is shining the brightest. We can see some of that value 1 in there, but we also see the little shadows caused by those overlapping boards as another value. Now, a lot of people would just pick up black and put there and then wonder why it doesn't look right. Well, what you can do, that's not going to be the same all the way through. That value of that little shadow caused by the overlapping board is going to change according to where it is in the light. And so what you could do then, start right here again, all right, so we can see that the little boards themselves, the way the light's shining on it, register pretty much in the value 1 area, but we can pull this over and check for what is the value of those little shadows. It's a tiny little thing in this photograph, but you can hold this up like this, close one eye and look through one of those holes and be sure this is in the same kind of light as the image you're looking at, and you can actually find the value that you see. If it's white, it might surprise you because most of the time you're going to see values darker than what you would identify white to be. So you know that white paint is not the answer there. All right, so to continue with the explanation, if we continue to move this, now we're seeing that those shadow values are a little bit closer to where we are right here, and we see actually they're about in this value range here. Well, my goodness, that's what we call a value 4 on the value scale, which is in the middle value range. It's not 10, as a lot of people would pick up. So that's the first thing, observe the values. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you is that the actual perception of the degree of value on that building changes. It's not white all the way through. And let me point that out to you. You can see the sun is obviously positioned somewhere over there because it's hitting strongest right here. Actually, it's more over there, I can tell, because there's a cast shadow from this part of the building that comes here. You pay attention to those things, then you know what to do. So if the sun's the strongest right here, this side is actually in shadow. And so it's catching some reflected light right in here, and white things will do that. They'll catch a lot of reflected light. But look at this area right in here, and especially right here, right under that porch, where shadow's being cast. So if I know it's white building, you might expect it to be value 1, but it's not. So then I'm going to just pull this over. It's darker than this value. See what comes through that little hole is darker than this value, darker than that value, darker than that value. It's even darker than this value. Let's take it on to 6. It's about value 6. Now values are on a continuum scale, so sometimes we might see something that would be between 5 and 6, but that's just kind of splitting hairs. So we know then that what goes right in here is going to be closer to value 6. So you can register those values, and then what's the skill that you need to show that? The skill is called blending, or the actual thing that you're going after is blending to create a gradation, and that's your first step. So I'm going to do a little bit here for you. Now I've got this strip here. I took this from this portion right here so that we could have kind of a blown up version. You have to excuse that plus. It was on the screen. I couldn't get rid of it. And you can see I ripped that off from my stock. But so now I've given them credit. But anyway, then you can see what's going on right here. Between here and here, I'm going to take this value right here, and show you how you can use the skill of gradating with the blending stroke in order to achieve a gradation, because that's what you would do first. So that finding the values, finding the right values, recognizing where the sun is, and then finding what is the darkest value you see in any particular area, and where does that gradate to. And in some cases you may have a cast shadow right here, where you'll have 2 different kinds of gradations, darker to a little bit lighter right here, and then it picks up with the light there where the light is actually reflecting back onto it. Looking for value and seeing values correctly, there's your first clue as to your first step. So you need to know what you're aiming for. Now on this one, what I want to show you, let's look at that value. What is that value? And we can see it's darker than that, about that value right there. So we're looking at a middle value of gray. You might also be tempted at that point, because it's a white building, you might be tempted to go with black and white. Well, that is it really has some variations in temperature in it. So we might see some cooler to warmer, and we actually do see that right in here. You can see maybe it feels a little bit warmer right in here maybe than it does right here. So it's better to start off with 2 colors that are complements to each other and that are dark coming out of the tube, so you'll have control. So I'm not going to say always use this set of colors, but if you just find 2 complements that are dark coming out of the tube, that's a good place to start, and then you'll need the white. Now, what I'm using here I'm using a blue-orange complement set. You could, as I said before, you could use almost any complementary set, but that's the set I'm using. The orange that I'm using is the Rembrandt Transparent Oxide Red. The blue that I'm using is the Gamlin Ultramarine Blue. And I do that because I know those 2 will neutralize each other, giving me a gray where I can get a little bit warmer by leaning in the mixture a little bit more towards the red-orange, or the orange here, or getting it cooler by leaning the mixture a little bit towards blue. Now another thing I like to do, and you know this if you've been watching these quick tips and seen my lessons, is I like to pre-mix a value scale. Now sometimes I will pre-mix just 3 values, dark, middle, light, and sometimes I'll pre-mix a range of at least 5. But that's just for convenience, nothing else. It's not an absolute necessary, it's just something I enjoy doing. All right, so we said that value 5, this value 5 is the value that we want to go for, and what we want to do is to gradate or create a gradation that goes from 5. Is this actually 1? Well, that's the way the photograph took it. It's closer to 2, almost leaning towards 1. So we've got a range there of values that we are gradating from 2. Now, in order to get that, this, I want a gray, I want a neutral, I'll put it right over here in my mixtures. I want a neutral at around value 5 because this is the value I'm starting with. So I'm going to use these two, and the way I'll do that is I'll just begin to mix them together, pull one to the other, and you watch it turn gray. Watch them neutralize each other because that's what complements do. This one started out a little bit on the neutral side to begin with, and that's what the transparent oxide red, burnt sienna, burnt umber, all those are already a little bit neutralized. But you see, as I add that blue to it, it gets even more neutral. Now I can decide how neutralized I want that to be. It's still a warm neutral, and if I hold this up like this, or if I were there painting in plein air, I'd hold it up like this and compare what's on my palette knife with what I'm looking at. If that felt a little bit warmer than what I want that shadow area to be, I would pick up more of the same value. This is because this is a value I'm going for, the darkest value, and add a little bit more blue to it. And you can watch it neutralize, watch it turn gray as we add the blue back into it. And you can see now we're getting closer to almost a true neutral. And another way to say that this is, we're working with the principle of intensity here, which is, we use the word intensity and we use the words chroma. Those two, some people prefer one over the other. It's the saturation of the hue, how much hue is actually in that color. Now we can see almost all the hue is gone. So hold it here, it still feels a little bit warm. I could keep it that way because the value is close enough. I'm going to hold it right up here. This is where I'm going. Okay, a little bit warm. The value is close enough. Might need to be just a little bit darker. But just to make a point, let's get it just a little bit cooler. And you can watch it turn cooler as I mix that blue into it. So at one point you will decide that's as cool as you want it and you will stop. Now generally speaking, well, you can't make a rule about this because it depends on the kind of light that's shining, but the temperature will change as it moves from shadow into light. How it changes depends on lots of things, so we won't go into that. That's not part of the lesson, or not part of the skill. Here we go. Now you can see when I hold that next to this, it's very close in temperature and very close in value. I think that's close enough in value. Now, all I have to do now is to use this with white to get the gradation. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So, we'll begin. I'll load the brush, get a nice thick loading of the brush, and just come right over here and I'll begin this gradation. Now you might say, that seems awfully dark. Yes, it does. Against that white canvas, it does seem dark. But we know, if I hold it right here and compare it, you see it's the right value. Okay, so get started with a band about why this is gradating subtly, so we don't know where one value stops. We can't see where one value stops and where the other ends. It's just going from dark to light. So that's good enough. All right, so be sure that I've got plenty. Now, what I can do next, I'll go back and reload the brush, and then I'm going to pull down my white here so that I can work directly into that white without contaminating the supply I have there. And I'm going to gradually reach into the white and pull just a little bit of white into that. And this is the skill of gradating. Now when I put it down here, I see it's just a bare change. I can overlap it into that dark I already have and use kind of a crisscross stroke like this, and then I can, this is one way to do it, where then you can pull that excess paint off the brush, hold it flat, and give it a slight little whisper on top of that connection of that change in value, and you see it begins to gradate. Now we can move it on down. Let's load the brush again with the value 5 of this neutral gray. Move it on down and pull a little bit. Now usually what happens here is that people will pull too much white into the brush, and I wonder why they didn't get a smooth gradation. So you continue like this, and I'm just going to go kind of fast now that I've shown you the skill. The skill involves the mixing of the color. It involves the controlling of the value as you go, and it involves the blending. And this is the blending that creates the gradation right here. All right, we'll continue that way, and each time as I'm moving down, each time I'm adding a little bit more white. No, I have to be patient here because this is a very subtle gradation. I might check to see how fast it's going, how fast the gradation is going. And let's see, I need more paint than that. Put a little bit more in, blend it in the brush on the palette. Or I could blend it, but it's an easier blend if you blend it on the palette as you go. So here we go. And the flatter you hold the brush next to the canvas, the more evenly that goes on. And then you continue to hold the brush a little bit flatter, pull that off, and keep moving backwards. That's just one way to do it. I'm just barely touching as I'm crisscrossing over that gradation. And you can keep working that till you get absolutely smooth gradation. All right, you see it's going very, very subtly. In fact, I may be going too slow. So let's change it. Let's pull even more light as we're getting closer down to where the light is hitting it stronger. We get even more light in the brush. And here's what we can do. Now, if that gradation is going too slow, which what I mean is that the value is not changing as fast here as it is changing here, yes, there's a speed to gradation. So if it's not changing as fast here as it is here, well, let me show you what you can do. We can pull the proportion of white we pull into the color is greater. So we pull it down and we got a stronger contrast here than we had before. But then what we can do is to work our way upward and let up on the pressure of the brush as we go upward. And you see, get little streaks as you begin to do that. You pull the paint out of the brush, and then a very light touch, and you continue to get that gradation. Now, if you see places like I have right here where it didn't quite gradate, you can even do this. You can even take your finger and smooth it out a little bit. Fingers are a wonderful painting tool. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit further on down. I think you've probably got the hang of how the skill involves, as I said before, it involves the degree, it involves gradually adding the white in. And then the degree of value, the jump in the value, that's caused by the white that you add in, and then you keep going down. Yes, all right. See, I have a little bit closer there. In fact, I could keep going and come back and do the gradation later. Now let's see how far. That's about it. Maybe a little bit. That photograph is probably overexposed by the camera. So you have something kind of like this. All right, now if I really want that smooth, I like my, if I can squint at it, it feels like a gradation. I like to leave the brush strokes behind, but some people like to have those brush strokes nice and smooth. So if you really want the brush stroke smooth, you can use a soft brush, which I don't have here handy, but you can use a soft brush and lightly wisp the soft brush over it, something like a mop, and made of squirrel hair or something like that, and that will give you that smooth gradation. But if you're happy enough just to leave a few brush strokes behind, have the gradation smooth enough, then this will suffice. All right, so that is step one. You've got the gradation of the building now. How about putting those clapboards in? All right, that's another skill. Let's show you that one now. Now we determined, well, let's determine what is that value right there. This is pretty consistent, pretty much the same value as it goes down. It begins to get lighter as it goes down, so you need to pay attention to that too. Notice you hardly see any indication of that little shadow caused by those boards overlapping. You hardly see any indication right down here. So that too must gradate. But you pay attention to where it gradates, and also notice that it's not just a straight line. Notice that the line, when you look really close, you see it's dark on this line. It's darker right here and gradually gets a little bit lighter as it goes here and then gets darker again. And so nothing is absolutely the same all the way across when, well, let's do it this way, in light and shadow you can expect that to happen, especially in direct light. All right, so we can determine the value. We can just start almost any place. Let's just determine the value. And I think we already determined that this is about a value of 5 to value 6. Now the skill that we're going to be needing to learn here for doing those little lines involves how you load the brush and how you use the brush, and also another little something I want to show you for how you're going to get those lines straight. So first of all, we load the brush. Now this will require a flat brush that will come to a chisel tip with the paint in it. So you can load the brush on the palette and be sure you have plenty of paint in there, and then you can pull it downward or outward or whatever until you get that chisel tip. See that chisel tip right there? All right. Now the next thing is to, let's just see, we can start about right. Well, let's start someplace. This is the other skill. It's a good idea to start in a place where you see that line more horizontal, because the lines, when you're seeing this is in 2-point perspective. This particular building is, well, actually this side's in 2-point perspective and this side's in 1-point perspective. We won't go to that, but what we see is that those shadow lines are tilted, but the tilt changes as those lines get closer to where your eyes are. That's the horizon line I talk about in another quick tip. Now, on this particular point of view, our eye level is about right here. We can see that that line is straighter. This is about right here, and that's a good place to start with those. All right, so let's see. Let's pull that down. Now, you can use another brush, the handle of another brush, to guide this, to keep that line straight. So you can find the tilt, find the location, and here's what you'll be doing. You'll be sliding the metal part of the brush, the ferrule part of the brush. You'll be sliding that along this as you make that straight line. And so what we'll do is use this like a maul stick and position it to whatever position the line is. Then we'll slide the brush, hold the brush at an angle. Let's see, about right here. Press it, press it, press it. As it slides along that angle, press it and press it. Now by pressing it like that, you get something that is closer to how we're seeing that line. The line is more broken up. It's not a straight line that's hard on the edge all the way across. So by using that little pressing motion I just showed you, as you move across, a little stamping motion with the tip of the brush at a chisel tip, then you can put those shadows in. And then beyond that, what you'll watch for is how you angle those lines as they move up and as they move down. Now, as we see, as this one moves down, that one becomes a little bit more horizontal. So we come down the same distance of that. Now, oh, that's too dark. Or I could stop it right there and lighten it, because it seems to do that. Just pick up a little bit more light in the brush and let's get it positioned again and keep stamping straight across, and that looks more natural. Now, as it comes down, it gets even lighter, so we get that a little bit lighter again as we load it on the tip of the brush, come down the same distance, and it's going to slant. You can check your slants, check how much it's slanting by what your eyes are doing, and be sure that you have position pretty much the same as that. Now, here's the other thing. Okay, good, that works great. It might not need to go all the way across. Like here, you don't see it all the way across. So you can choose the value. Now in this case, what we could do is we make it a little bit darker over on the corner there, have it a little bit lighter as it's going that way, and you see that makes a more natural looking clapboard. So practice those skills, and rather than going right to a painting of a clapboard building, just go on some sheets of canvas or gessoed paper and practice the skill. You know, painters don't do that enough. Musicians do. Musicians will practice the skill of their instrument before they're doing concert, or even just to learn a tune, or just to even learn a new move on the instrument. Painters won't go directly and start doing a painting. That's a mistake. So practice the skill until you feel like you have control of it. It's a several step skill that I just went through there. And I think you'll find that you'll be very pleased with all the strokes that you make that will create that clapboard building. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.